And one of the things I always kind of go to is, first off, when people think this is way out talking about plants, I always say, hey, listen, the National Cancer Institute recommends 9 servings of fruits and vegetables for the prevention of cancer. That's about as mainstream
as you
as you
can
can get. And the reason they came up with that recommendation is because that's what the studies show. Plants have some very powerful, anti-cancer effects. But I always like to look at the blue zones. I don't know if you saw the Blue Zones documentary on Netflix. I think everybody should see it. It's kind of interesting.
It's the best.
But when you go into the blue zones, which is Sardinia, Ikaria, Okinawa, Nicoya, and Loma Linda. I always like to use Loma Linda because it's in the United States.
Yeah. Popular, busy Western city.
Right. And all of these groups eat about 90 to 95% plant-based. In Loma Linda, women live on average about 10 years longer than their American counterparts. Men actually live about 14 years longer, and it's mainly because of these lifestyle changes. And it's not only, if you watch that Netflix, it's not only the food, but it's also things like, how much are you moving? What are your social connections? What's your purpose in life? There's a lot of other things too that are involved with longevity, but there is a common theme that they all eat about anywhere from 90 to 95% plant-based. And if they do eat meat, it's usually the size of a deck of cards.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Eat Real to Heal podcast. I am your host, Dr. Nicolette Richer. And yes, we have taken a bit of a break on the podcast, getting them out over the summer. We've made lots of changes over here at Richer Health Consulting, and we're so excited to bring new programming, new events to you and your community. So check into the intermittent advertisements that we have going on, letting you know about events that we have coming up, retreats, incredible programming, all in the name of helping you reverse chronic diseases. So to welcome back the show, we have the incredible medical doctor, Dominic Brady, on our podcast next. And Dr. Brady is an award-winning plastic surgeon who was diagnosed with incurable multiple myeloma back in 2017. Now, I love this show because here we have a medical doctor who went through all of the training that all other medical doctors go through. And with the treatment that he was offered, you'll hear in the podcast that the prognosis was poor, that even with taking the medical treatment, there was a high probability he wouldn't be around living within a year or two after his diagnosis. So he did what not a lot of other people would do. He dove into the research. He, looked at his disease from multiple different angles, and he found that there were treatment options that he had not been taught about in medical school that he decided to try. And of course he did. And years later, Dr. Dominic Brady is doing things that have not been done before in the field of multiple myeloma. So Dr. Brady was determined to augment his conventional treatment with natural protocols, and he took that deep dive and started applying a whole foods plant-based diet. So that was number one. Looked at how exercise would support his body, and of course looking at targeted supplements versus targeted medication. And now he is in this incredible, remarkable remission, which has completely surprised his oncologist. And he's now on an extremely low dose of immunomodulators with the goal to be completely off of his medication, which is something that has not been seen in the world of multiple myeloma. So join us in this podcast because you're going to hear directly from Dr. Brady everything that you can do to be able to support your body so that you can not only beat the odds, but also thrive and survive and live the best life possible. As you know, often when we don't change our lifestyle and you just go through the medical treatment options, there's a lot of side effects that it comes with. So why not boost your body, heal your body fully so that you don't have to live with the side effects and you can, like what Dr. Dominic Brady did, beat the odds and live a long, vibrant, healthy life. So let's dive into the show now. I really look forward to your thoughts. So please, if you listen to this podcast and you like it, go ahead and send me an email. Let me know. Follow us on our social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook. I think we have a TikTok account. I should figure that out. And let us know what you think about the podcast. And if you know anybody out there that is suffering from any of the chronic diseases that we cover on the show, please share the episode with your loved ones, because that is how this information gets out there, that we are living in a very narrow-minded medical field that doesn't look at nutrition, that doesn't look at alternative treatments, even though the alternative treatments sometimes work even better than the conventional treatments. So go ahead and share the podcast. You never know, you could save somebody's life. Okay, thanks for listening. We'll see you at the end of the show. Bye for now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Eat Real to Heal podcast. It is so exciting to be back here. I've taken this summer off. As you've noticed, we haven't been putting up too many shows. We have a backlog of shows that we pre-recorded, so those are going to be coming up. Can't wait for you to see those. But I am so excited by today's conversation to have Dr. Dominic Brady on our show. Welcome, Dominic.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Very, very nice to have you here. I was so excited when your agent, I guess your podcast rep, reached out to us promoting you. I don't know if that was somebody on your team or you hire externally, but they hit the nail on the head, because sometimes we get, these podcast reps that think they know what we're about. And then we get somebody who's promoting, 80-20 rule, eat all the, you can eat the processed food, that refined food, or like, hey, can we promote keto on your program? And I'm like, wow, they really missed the mark. But when I saw your media kit come through, I was like, finally, somebody who knows what Eat Real to Heal truly, truly means. And your story is incredibly unique, because you're not just a doctor out there helping people reverse their health conditions, particularly cancer, but you also were diagnosed with cancer. And so I want to dive into a little bit of your history and how you got here to be doing this incredible work in the world.
Yes, well, I had a plastic surgery practice that was really one of the most successful in the United States. About 3.5 years ago, I had a venture capital group come in and make an offer. We had obviously a surgery center, we had a med spa, and then an anti-aging center. And at that time, we were actually ranked number 6 in the country through Allergan, the company that makes Botox. We had over 100 employees. So at that point, I sold the practice and I dedicated myself 100% to helping cancer patients. But the way I actually got into...
So hold on. Whoa. That's a big jump. So how did you get into plastic surgery, and why did you get into plastic surgery? And then also, where did you go to med school? Just want to put all of that into perspective for people.
Yeah. Well, I basically thought I was going to do plastic surgery when I was 10 years old. I remember that.
What? Why?
When I did aptitude, I was always a really good artist. In fact, when I was younger, there was a program they had through the Carnegie Institute in Pittsburgh where they picked 2 kids from every class that would go there every Saturday to learn art. So I've always been very artistic. And then when I would take aptitude tests, I would always score highest in art and science. So plastic surgery is kind of like a combination of that. So I remember telling my mom, I go, hey, when I grow up, I'm going to be a plastic surgeon. So that was something that was always kind of on the back of my mind.
I just have to, again, stop you there, because I don't think most 10-year-olds would look at those aptitude tests and put that and that together, which I love that you did that. Had you been exposed to plastic surgery in your life before that? Like, what would make a 10-year-old think that?
Just because, of course, I'd see plastic surgery programs like on TV and things like that. But
yeah.
I always knew that science and art, the best way to combine that would be most likely through plastic surgery.
Okay.
And then the
This
other
is
thing that
awesome.
was interesting when I was 10, this is another thing that's kind of crazy, is my mother used to get Prevention magazine every month. And I remember as a kid, I would read that thing from cover to cover. I was just fascinated by it. And that went on, even when I went to medical school, my mother would actually send me her Prevention magazines. It was crazy. So I was reading those even through medical school. So I've always had an interest in health and nutrition. And that's why when I eventually went on to develop my practice, I always had an anti-aging division where we would do weight management. I would check different hormone levels, different vitamin levels. I actually used to do mesenchymal stem cell treatments for people's joints, and I used to do
Wow.
IV stem cells for like lung treatments and so forth. So it's always been, health and nutrition's always been something that I've been interested in also. So just the way that my really practice developed was because of my interest, even from like a 10-year-old kid. So it's been kind of interesting. I've been able to do what I was meant to do. So,
Well, the other part about that I do have to mention is your observational ability is obviously, you're quite astute. And for most 10-year-old kids are, on their iPhones now, or they are, running around outside doing cartwheels and, not often like reading through their parents', preventative health magazine. And so I just want to point that out, that I think that's very interesting. I'm really curious about how doctors arrive where they are, doing the work that they do, or anybody in any field, but particularly doctors, because that's, I'm involved in that world. And you see some doctors who will, for example, not even understand what Eat Real to Heal is, because they went to med school, they studied, they learned how to prescribe medications, and that's what they do for their whole entire life for the next 35, 40 years. And they don't think
exactly.
about preventative medicine. They don't think about nutrition. They don't think about health and wellness from any other standpoint than you diagnose and you prescribe. And there's even a study
Exactly.
that was, or several studies that were done to show that a medical doctor in their 60s, 70s, 80s are still often prescribing the exact same medications that they learned about in med school. They won't even deviate from that.
Yeah, because a lot of it is they don't really have the time to even get
No,
into all the scientific articles and so forth. I mean, it's
exactly.
amazing in medical school. And you probably already know this, but we probably had maybe at the most 10 hours on health and nutrition. And it was the equivalent of a high school health class.
Right.
If you don't get enough vitamin C, you'll get scurvy. If you don't get enough vitamin D, you'll get rickets. I mean, it was that basic. And we really learned nothing about preventative medicine through lifestyle and nutrition. It was zero, which is really pretty pathetic.
And for you, having already spent, probably a decade or so of your life reading these magazines on preventative health, and then you get into medical school, like how did you feel when you were going through medical school, knowing that you weren't learning about this other side?
I just knew that that's the way it was. I just kept reading my Prevention magazine. Like every night I would make a salad, and
Yeah.
even though I wasn't a very good cook, I could at least make a really big salad every day. I'd usually have some fish sticks. But I always made it a point to eat a variety of plant foods, even when I was young. I wasn't plant-based, but I always made it a point to eat a huge salad every single day. That was something that I always learned from my Prevention magazine.
Right. Okay. So this is good. I just needed to understand what was going on for you at that time. So then let's fast forward, and you get into plastics, and you
Right.
build this amazing practice. I love the fact that you had the anti-aging departments within the practice. So that's a beautiful thing. And then what made your practice so phenomenal that you were one of the top 6 in the country?
Well, I worked with my brother. My brother was he was the like CFO, CEO. He ran the business part, the marketing. I focused on the medical part, directing all the medical people in our business. So I think we had a very good working relationship. And I really think that's how it really did build. And we had we ran things very, very tightly. I mean, anytime I would have doctors come in to observe me do surgery, I mean, they consistently said, man, you run a tight ship. So a lot of it is management too, treating your employees well. We would give them tickets to baseball games, Steeler games. Every year we would take them to a baseball game or like an event. So I think it was good management. And also we provided exceptional care and we got great results. So it was part the way that my brother did the marketing, the management on the business side, and then my part, managing all the medical issues in the practice.
Okay, nice. So, okay, I like that. So really a holistic framework applied to your business as well. So then fast forward, you have this practice, you get bought out. Somebody comes along and says, we want to buy you out. And why did they want to buy you out? They wanted to add you to their existing business? What was the reason for that?
What a venture capital group does is they come in, they make an evaluation of what your practice is worth, and then they basically give you money. And their goal is to, like, for instance, we had three centers when they bought us out. Now there's about 16 of them.
Right. They have the money to go and expand.
Now they have three in Cleveland. They built like 5 more in Pittsburgh. They have a couple in Columbus, so what they do is they try to scale it so that another venture capital group comes in and they offer them more money. So that's how it works. And I'll be quite honest with you, when I did have to stay on for a couple years, because that's how they usually like to transition, but it really was not fun because basically all they do is look at computers all day and numbers, and they really don't pay a lot of attention to the people that work for the business. So it just wasn't something that I really enjoyed, and I'm glad I'm totally out of it, and I'm just doing cancer lifestyle coaching. So
so let's talk about that. What was that pivotal moment for you that it helped you transition into? You have a remarkable story, and I know our listeners are going to be blown away when they hear this, so let's start sharing that.
Well, what happened with me was really interesting. I told you I had this anti-aging center, and I will tell you, I was as much confused about diet as anyone. I was hearing about keto, you're hearing about paleo, you're hearing about vegan, vegetarian. And I used to really tell my patients, and I always had some kind of an animal product with every meal because I thought that I needed to do that to get my protein. So the whole story actually started in September of 2017, which was 2 months before I got diagnosed with this multiple myeloma. My wife and I were on a 2-week Viking cruise. And because I had this anti-aging center, I always read Prevention Magazine. I've read over 300 books on health and nutrition. So when I get on a vacation, first thing I do is I get on Kindle and I look for a health and nutrition book. So I'm on this cruise, September 2017, Michael Gregor's book pops up, How Not to Die.
How Not to Die. That's a good one, everybody.
So I'm looking at that title and going, oh, this is an interesting book. So I start reading it. And for your viewers that haven't read it, if you get the hardback, it's about 2 inches thick, and about 1 inch of it are scientific references. And being a medical doctor, that was the thing that really intrigued me about this. There weren't any anecdotes or anything. It was all really the science. And what the science was showing over and over again was that cultures and research cohort groups that ate more plant-based had lower incidence of cancer, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, really all cause mortality. So I'm 2 days into this cruise, and I tell my wife, I say, Trina, I'm going to start eating whole food plant-based. She thought I was crazy because we're on this cruise. I mean, there's all kind of meat and dairy and desserts and everything. But from that point, I've been eating whole food plant-based since September of 2017.
Wow.
So I came home. And it was kind of weird. The first week that I was home, I was in the middle of a surgery case, and I felt a little pop in my right clavicle. And I didn't think a whole lot of it. I thought maybe it was a tendonitis. And it just kept getting worse and worse. So September, it's getting worse and worse. October, it's getting worse and worse. And I remember the end of October, my wife and I went on a trip out to Portland. And it was keeping me up at night, and that was starting to concern me. And I remember telling my wife, I said, Trina, I think I have bone cancer. And she said, you're the healthiest person I know. You don't have bone cancer.
So what made you think bone cancer, though? Is that like your inner healer is just whispering to you, or what was?
Well, because it was keeping me up at night. But before it would hurt when I would use it.
Yeah.
But then it was like, 4 a.m, you're feeling pain in your clavicle. I mean, that's not normal. And that's the thing that kind of really disconcerted me. So it was about 10 days after, I remember it was November 10th, 2017. My wife and I were watching television. I accidentally knocked over a container of water. I reached for it, and my clavicle it broke right in half. So I went to the urgent care center. It was completely displaced. Then I went to a friend of mine who's a orthopedic doctor. He ordered an MRI. And then this happened on a Sunday. He called me on Friday. He goes, Nick, that's my nickname. He said, Nick, I have really bad news for you. He said, you either have multiple myeloma or you have a metastasis from another cancer. And I was like totally blown away. My brother came up, he's crying. My kids are up. I mean, it was traumatic.
Yeah.
So I went to the oncologist after they did all of these blood tests, biopsies, and so forth. And they came up with this IgA kappa type myeloma. Now, for your listeners, myeloma is a cancer of the plasma cells. The plasma cells are the cells that make your antibodies. And there's 3 different types. There's IgA, IgG, IgM. IgA, the one that I had, is the most aggressive. And because of that, my oncologist, he wanted to put me on a triple regimen of 2 oral medications and then a medication called Velcade, which is a proteasome inhibitor, which is injected into your abdomen every week. And when I start reading about Velcade, almost everybody that gets Velcade gets a pretty bad peripheral neuropathy, nerve deterioration of their fingertips and their toes. And it can even, I have some patients that I counsel that it's actually severe pain. I have one guy that's on oxycodone every day. His peripheral neuropathy has gotten that bad. So I really didn't want to experience that, especially since I didn't know if I was going to go back into surgery or not. I really didn't know what my future was, but I really didn't want the Velcade. And the other thing, remember, I had been on a whole food plant-based diet already for 2 months, and I was 100% sure that was going to help me in this battle. So I told my doctors, hey, I'm not doing the Velcade. He got very upset with me. He said, there's no way you're going to get into a remission just on these 2 oral medications. But I said, hey, listen, this is what I'm doing. So every month, my numbers just kept getting better and better. And while these numbers were getting better, I was doing a deep dive into the scientific literature. I wanted to find out every single supplement I could take, every different lifestyle change I could make, any teas I could drink. So I kept adding all these different things to my regimen as my numbers were coming down. And then when I got to 6 months, I was in a complete remission. I mean, my doctor was completely blown away. He didn't even think I was going to get into it. First off, but to do it in 6 months was kind of mind blowing to him.
Okay. So there's a lot of things that are happening for me right now. I'm number one. So you had already understood preventive medicine, you're eating your salads, you're doing all of this, and then you dive into the literature that talks about plant-based whole food. And so you really did move to a plant-based whole food diet. There was no processed food. You're making everything from scratch at this point, and you're just eating loads of nutrients, diversity and abundance, I'm guessing.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
If you follow,
and my wife was in full blast with me. So, and that's the other thing.
No dairy, no meat.
No dairy, no meat. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Just whole food, plant-based.
Yeah. And then added supplements, and then, other lifestyle changes that are health promoting. Okay.
Exactly. But my wife was my partner through this. And that's one of the things I always encourage my patients. A lot of times the husband will be there during the consult, and I tell them, listen, you guys need to do this together, because it's going to be really hard if you're doing it and your husband's not doing it, because
100%.
She's going to be making 2 different meals, and it's just, And my wife and I have actually found it to be like a lot of fun doing it together.
Yeah.
Even when we go somewhere new, like looking for like restaurants and so forth, that we can kind of go, and it makes it fun. And my wife's always in recipe books. She's on Instagram looking at different recipes. In fact, a lot of the recipes I put on Instagram, she sends to me to put on Instagram. So I tell her, hey, if you ever come across a good recipe, send it to me. I'm going to post it on Instagram. So
that's awesome.
But it's really become a lot of fun. And we've learned foods that we never ate before. Like I never had a dragon fruit before. Like the other day I was eating a fig. I never ate a fig before. So we really try to diversify our diet as much as we can. We try to get over 30 plant foods per week, which we'll talk about when we get into the microbiome, because that's probably one of the most important things you can do to enhance the diversity of your microbiome. But
now let me just jump in there, because the 30, they say 30 to 50 different, like, diversity of whole plant-based whole foods a week. And, doctor, I'm sure you're familiar with the C word, and Dr. David Siebenschreiber. Have you read the Anti-Cancer Diet?
Not really. I'm more familiar with the American Gut Project. Robert Knight in Colorado. That's probably the largest evaluation of the gut microbiome in the world, where he's already evaluated over 15,000 stool samples in correlation with very detailed questionnaires. What do you eat? How do you sleep? How do you exercise? And so forth. And in his study, he found people that ate 30 or more different plant foods had the most diverse, healthiest microbiome. The ones that ate 10 or less had the least healthiest, and they actually had a fairly high number of antibiotic resistant bacteria.
Exactly.
So that's kind of a basic precept. And a lot of times people that are kind of gun shy of doing a whole food plant-based diet, I just tell them, hey, why don't we just kind of start with that? Because you can get 25 different plants in one salad.
Oh, 100%.
Or you can get 12 different plants in a soup.
Yeah.
So it's really not that hard. It's really not that hard to do. So at least that way, you kind of break them into the whole concept, a lot easier.
So one question I just want to jump in there too. Can you please let our audience know the prognosis for multiple myeloma? So when you got diagnosed?
Well, yeah, typically what happens with myeloma, there was an article in the journal Leukemia. Usually most people with myeloma get their first relapse at about 2.2 years. I mean, I'm already 6 years out and I haven't had a relapse. And normally what happens is that, and one thing that your listeners need to understand is when I first got diagnosed, I read an article in Nature, which is one of the premier journals in the world. Dr. Mikhail Munchki, he's a very well-known genomic researcher. He wrote an article that said by the time you are diagnosed with cancer, you have about 5,000 different mutations in that cancer. And by the time you relapse, you're at about 12,000. So one of the things that I focus on when I'm doing coaching for people is you really have to up your plant foods, because they are loaded with antioxidants and phytonutrients. In fact, phytonutrients, I listened to a podcast by Jed Fahey, and he's one of the world's experts on phytonutrients. And a lot of people think there's over 25,000. I've heard people say 100,000. He actually thinks there's over 5 million phytochemicals in edible plant foods. And these are really the powerhouses. These are the anti-cancer powerhouses, these phytochemicals that give colors, to the foods. So that's one of the things that I really focus on with these patients, because when they're getting the treatment, for instance, when they're getting myeloma, they're taking these drugs that are causing more DNA mutations, because all of these chemo drugs damage DNA. So you're going to get to that 12,000 fairly quickly. So typically what happens with myeloma, like in about 2.5 years, they relapse, then they get them on a different protocol. And the other thing with these cancers, they start developing resistance to the initial, they develop more mutations, then they do another medication, and then that might last for a year and a half. Typically, the time between relapses starts getting shorter and shorter as it goes along. So the average person now, I will tell you, probably about 20 years ago, the average person that had myeloma, they only made it like maybe a year or two. I mean, I remember I had a nurse that actually worked for me. She was about 62 years old, very fit, looked like she was 40 years old. And I remember her asking me all kind of questions about myeloma. And little did I know I was going to end up with it. But she was dead in about a year and a half. I mean, it was, in fact, my oncologist didn't even treat myeloma years ago because it was so depressing. I mean, he said, what patients would come in and they'd be dead like in a year or two. But nowadays, I would say the average lifespan for myeloma is about, the last I read is about 5 to 6 years. But there
it's
are
not
people,
long.
no, but there are people that can make 20 years. I will tell you what happened to me recently. July 26th, I went into my oncologist and I had already started weaning down my medication. I actually get it from India now. It's a generic form, which is, believe it or not, when I was taking the regular brand Revlimid, it cost $16,000 a month, believe it or not. My copay was like $1,000. In 2022, 2 India companies came out with a generic that was FDA approved. So I got a hold of one of the Indian pharmacists. It's $1 a capsule. So I get 30 capsules for $30. So I ordered 180 of them, and then I started kind of toying with reducing the number of days. So I would take 21 days on, 7 days off. So then I went to 20 days on, 8 days off. All my numbers held. Then I went to 19, 9 days off. Then I went to 18, 10 days off. And I just, like, my last dose was, I took it for 16 days, 12 days. I actually take my lab work tomorrow. And if my numbers hold, then I'll be doing like 15 days off when I do the next, and then 14.
So something about this that I just really want to point out to individuals. So you're doing this, you decided to do this on your own?
No, I got approval from my oncologist. So in fact, on July 26th, he told me just to go off all meds. He said, you don't have myeloma.
Hang tight. We're taking a quick break to share an exciting update from one of our own companies, and you'll definitely want to hear this. Are you ready to finally reverse your chronic diseases and take control of your health once and for all? At Richer Health, we're offering exclusive 3-day and 4-day Eat Real to Heal retreats designed to help you do just that. Using proven metabolic nutrition and detoxification, we'll teach you how to heal your body naturally with real food as medicine. Don't miss this life-changing opportunity to reset your health and thrive. Spots are limited, so visit richerhealth.ca today to secure your spot and start your healing journey. And now, back to the show.
He looked me in the eye, and I would never say this to a patient. He goes, I promise you, you are never going to die of myeloma. So
your oncologist told you this?
My oncologist, he looked me straight in the eye.
This is okay. So I have there's so many pieces here. I just want to pull these threads out for our listeners, because number one, your doctor knows you're on a plant-based whole food diet.
Yes.
Your oncologist knows that. Does he ask questions about it?
Yeah, all the time. When I go there, he's asking me, when I was in there July 26th, he's asking me, what dose do you recommend your patients for turmeric? Do you add he was asking me all questions about supplements. I put people on strontium, like they put these individuals on these bisphosphonates, like Zometa, to increase their bone density, because people with myeloma do get a very severe osteoporosis. And I actually had that and developed a T8 compression fracture early on. I would always put 60-pound weight behind my head and do like 100 crunches every day.
Mm-hmm.
And no one really told me I had osteoporosis from this myeloma. So I went on this Zometa, which is a bisphosphonate, and you get an IV infusion. And the first time I got it, I woke up in the middle of the night with the most severe sternal pain I've ever had in my life. I mean, it scared the hell out of me. And then the second time I got it, I got really bad flu symptoms and I got back pain. And then the third time I got it, I got really bad flu symptoms and back pain. So then I start reading more and more about it. Like the half-life of it is like 50 years. Like you never really get the stuff out of your system. And 4% of people get a fracture of their mandible. It's like it's a necrosis of the mandible, and they get this weird hip fracture that's an oblique hip fracture that you don't see in the normal population. So I started investigating strontium citrate. I had heard about it about 20 years ago at an anti-aging meeting. Jonathan Wright was giving a lecture on it. And they actually, in Europe, came up with an inorganic form to be able to sell it on the market, strontium raylanate. And all the studies show that it had like an amazing ability to increase bone density, increase bone fractures. But then there was some hearsay that it was possibly increasing the risk of cardiovascular events. So the company that made it just took it off the market. The organic form, which is strontium citrate, which is the one that I recommend, you can get it on Amazon for like $15, big jar of it. I take 600, it's 680 milligrams every night. So I take my calcium in the morning, and I take my strontium at night. In 2 years, my bone density went up 17%.
Wow.
Which is like, my oncologist was like totally blown away with that. He said, I don't even see anything close to that with Zometa, and you're not getting any side effects. Strontium is a normal element. You find it in root vegetables. It's in the water supply. It's in seafood. It's just all over the place. But what it does is it competes for the calcium binding site. So it's stronger than calcium. It weighs a little bit more. The only thing I tell people, like, is if your DEXA scan result went up 17%, you got to subtract 10%. So my 17% increase was really like 10. A 15. It was like 15.3%. I took 10% off of that.
Oh, 10% off of it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So big deal. I mean, it's 15.3% in 2 years. I mean, that's pretty mind-blowing. So I typically, like, he recommends strontium now for his patients. So he's seen what has happened to me. He knows that what I'm doing is helping myself. And I send him a lot of my videos that I do on Instagram when there's different articles that I see. In fact, I just sent him one the other day when I find something that I find that's kind of interesting. In fact, I sent him the one, it's really, it kind of gets into the microbiome. I don't know if you're familiar with this article. It came out of Sloan Kettering. Urvi Shaw published it, Dr. Urvi Shaw, and she's plant-based. And she actually got plant-based. She got diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma when she first started her fellowship, and which is kind of crazy at a very young age. But what she did is she took multiple myeloma patients that were what they call MRD negative, minimal residual disease negative. So they don't have any myeloma cells that can be found. They put one group on a plant-based diet, they put the other group just on a standard American diet. And what they found was in the plant-based diet, the butyrate levels, which are the short-chain fatty acids that are created by the gut bacteria that are very anti-inflammatory, they have a lot of very potent anti-cancer effects. Those people were able to stay in the MRD negative category for a much longer time, and a lot of them are still MRD negative. The people that were eating the standard American diet came out of MRD negative very quickly. So that was definite proof that a whole food plant-based diet for myeloma has a dramatic effect on keeping people into an MRD negative state, which was really, to me, it was mind-blowing. And finally, it got some of the people, I'm on some of these websites, and, you talk about plant-based, they go, well, I was a vegetarian, I still got multiple, like you always hear that kind of stuff. But when this article came up, it was really well done science, and it really got people thinking about, possibly making this kind of a lifestyle change.
Well, and I just want to touch on that piece though, because we see this all the time right now. We have all these celebrities that are not vegan and vegetarian anymore. And, but the thing is that I hate when people say vegan and vegetarian diets because it means
Oh yeah.
nothing.
Oh
It means
yeah.
nothing,
I
right?
hate the word vegan. I mean, it's like
Yeah,
that's the worst word,
no,
because
exactly.
you can be eating Doritos and drinking Coke all day and you're a
And
vegan.
snorting Coke and drinking whiskey and you're still vegan, right?
Exactly.
I know, and
Exactly.
consuming all of these plastic products and,
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
that are off gassing and still be vegan. And this is the part that drives me crazy, but also being like when people say, oh, I'm plant-based. And I'm like, because you eat the Impossible Burger and Beyond Meat Burger does not make you healthy. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure,
Right.
it's plant-based, but that's not, it's manufactured in a lab. It's got, soy protein isolate. It's not a whole protein. It's not a whole food. It's not a whole anything. And this is what people need to understand is that, oh yeah, you got sick probably because you were like, this is where I would love to do a study where we look at all the individuals who were plant-based and got sick, but then we analyze their diet and see like, what foods were you eating? Was it diverse? Did it have 30 different things or even 10 different things? Is it refined? Is it processed? Like, this is what we need to see. Do you have tons of refined oils, refined, sugars? You can still call yourself plant-based. So this is a huge piece people need to understand, especially if you're taking advice from celebrities right now that are like, oh, I went back to eating meat because I didn't feel well. You didn't feel well because you were not eating a whole foods, plant-based, plant-strong diet.
Exactly. In fact, I don't know if you ever read The Starch Solution by John McDougall, but he's got a chapter in there called The Fat Vegan. I don't know if you ever read that chapter.
No.
But that's what he talks about is, you can call yourself vegan, but you're eating potato chips, you're eating Doritos, you're drinking Coke. And just because you're not eating animal products, you think you're going to be healthy. And some of those people are the most unhealthy people on the face of the earth.
On the face
of the
earth.
Obviously, if they start eating, like going paleo or something, eating some meat and like some vegetables and so forth, they're probably going to feel better.
Yeah.
Especially if they're giving up those ultra processed foods, which I would say that's the only good thing about these keto and paleo diets is at least they tell people not to eat the ultra processed foods.
Exactly.
And I think sometimes that's why they feel probably a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to give one more example. We have a series of plant-based whole food restaurants, and they're 100% organic. We take our buckwheat, we grind it down into flour to make our pancakes. We don't have a single can opener. Like, everything comes from the farms or directly from our plant-based whole food organic supplier. It's sourced from the best places. And, one of our first employees that we had working there, she's like, I'm so happy to work here because, I've been vegetarian my whole life. She's from the UK. Her mom was vegetarian. But then all of a sudden every day she'd be like, oh, I get chronic headaches, chronic migraines, chronic this, chronic that. Her period was all over the map, lots of PMS symptoms, like this poor kid. And so then I was like, well, what are you eating? And so she didn't actually eat vegetables. All she ate was pasta and tomato sauce, and sometimes pasta without the tomato sauce because she didn't really like tomatoes.
Oh, wow.
But she'd been vegetarian her whole life. So just want to say, for people who are listening, the next time somebody does tell you they're vegetarian, vegan, or plant-based, start asking some discerning questions. Okay. And then, and it's critical. So that you
the other thing is when patients say they use the word, I eat healthy.
Oh yeah.
And then you ask them, okay, what did you have for breakfast? What did you have for lunch? And then it's like, oh man, or I'll have them fill a food journal out, and you just kind of really see what the heck is going on. So why they're having.
And I used to only meet my clients in their house, because the first thing they would say is, I don't understand why I just got diagnosed because I eat so healthy. And I say, no problem. Let me come and do our health consult with your whole family, so that I do the same thing. The whole family needs to be present, and because everybody needs to be on the same page. But then the minute they start saying, I eat so healthy, I start opening up all their cupboards.
Oh,
and then,
wow.
Oh yeah. Well, it's because, and I pull this out, and I have to show them, this is not a whole food. This box of organic Cheerios is not healthy food from Whole Foods. You might be spending your whole paycheck on Whole Foods, but it does not mean you're healthy. So this is so important. So let's dive in. Okay. So here you are, you've been diagnosed, you have this amazing oncologist, which I just want to say that you are I'm sure you made that happen. I'm hoping you made that happen with your oncologist, but not all oncologists are on board with their patients eating a plant-based diet. I just need to say that because a lot
Oh
of
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
right.
Right. Oh yeah. 100%. Yeah.
So
The
you've
first thing
built up
they
this.
ask, obviously, where'd you get your protein? So that's the
No,
first thing
exactly,
they
exactly.
ask you.
So you have a good person on your team who's supporting you in doing this. Let's go back to when you start basically titrating your meds down. But the
Right.
part about that is like, how does anybody who has multiple myeloma in the United States afford $16,000 a month of medications?
Well, the insurance covered most of it. So
Okay.
I paid, it was about $1,000 a month. So I've paid literally over $60,000 over the course of my myeloma.
But what about somebody who's low income, who's not a medical
They
doctor
have,
with a successful plastic surgery business that
they
you've
have,
sold?
they have special programs that help support people. So
Okay.
a lot of them don't pay anything, So
Okay.
if you're, they look at your income and so forth. Where my income was, I wasn't going to get any support. So I just paid the copay.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting, and it's really in a lot of ways disgusting, Celgene had the patent on Revlimid, which is the brand name for the lenalidomide. But they lost their patent back, I think it was like in 2015, but they pulled all kind of legal strings so that the generic companies couldn't make the Revlimid. So in the meantime, every year they kept jacking up their prices. And because this Revlimid was like 80% of their income, their revenue. So they were protecting it through all these legal maneuvers. And then finally in 2022, these two India companies, Dr. Reddy and Natco, they got FDA approval through the FDA. So you can now get those for like dirt cheap. I get this guy on the internet and they're at my door like in 5 days. I mean, it's crazy.
What?
Yeah.
Now I know most people who are listening to this would never even consider looking outside of the US or Canada or whatever their country of, medical care is for these generic made brands. So what advice do you have to give to people about that if they are listening to this podcast and then they're
do people know that 90% of the antibiotics that we use are made in China?
Right. Yeah.
Even the Revlimid, the brand that I was using, it's made in Switzerland. It's not made in the United States.
Right.
Most of these drugs aren't even made in America. They're made in other countries. So what I did with my situation, just so you know, when I first tried the India brand, I did it just for 2 months because I just wanted to make sure that it worked the same as the Revlimid. All my numbers stayed exactly the same, and everything I read about it had the same amount of lenalidomide in it and so forth. So after 2 months, and my oncologist actually recommended doing that too. Hey, why don't we just try it for 2 months, see what happens?
Amazing.
If the numbers are fine, then just order, so that's when I ordered like 180 different capsules. So that's when I started playing with weaning it down. And my oncologist agreed that we could do that because I'd been stable for so many years.
Amazing.
And I've been doing it. My numbers have stayed exactly the same. So I'm just going to keep weaning down until I hopefully get down to zero.
So can I ask you the question that all my clients ask this question of me, and I usually tell them, hey, this is not important necessarily to know. What's more important is the decision we make moving forward. But have you looked into the research and done any research as to the potential cause of the multiple myeloma? Do you have any theories?
Well, I think in my situation, I know a lot of the things that I was doing wasn't creating a healthy lifestyle. Like I was eating, a salad every day. Every morning I'd have berries. I mean, I think from a dietary point of view, I was okay. But I did eat meat in my salads. I always had chicken. And when I came home at night, we didn't eat red meat, but we always had some seafood or something. And I always had like a regular dairy yogurt with my berries in the morning. So my diet wasn't horrible, but it really wasn't great. And I was putting, animal products that weren't grass fed or anything. And not that I even think that makes any difference into my food. The other thing is I lived a very stressful life. I mean, when you
Mhm.
do plastic surgery, it's one of the most stressful things you can do. I mean, I was doing working on people's faces, their bodies. You know, when somebody's looking in the mirror and you did for instance, a facial rejuvenation, I mean, they're analyzing every little thing. I mean, it's and then you're worried about a complication. If they get a complication, then you're worried about getting sued. So your sleep is horrible. I mean, I would say my sleeping patterns, if I was getting 4 hours of sleep per night, I was probably lucky, just because I was always worrying about things. So I would say my lifestyle really probably had a lot to do with it. But the other thing people need to realize too is that, sometimes getting cancer is just bad luck. Blood cancers, for example, blood cells divide at a very fast rate.
Mhm.
So every time the blood cell goes through mitosis, the DNA opens up and it makes it more prone to getting free radical damage. So sometimes it can just be just bad luck. But I would say most cancers, and I would say it's probably up to like 90% are due to lifestyle issues.
Yeah.
What you're eating, what kind of, are you smoking? Are you drinking a lot of alcohol? Are you eating a lot of crappy foods? I think a lot of it you're not exercising, you're obese, you're diabetic, all those things really have an effect. But for me, I think it was really my stressful lifestyle that was really the main issue. One thing I did do, I will tell you, I don't think I've ever told anybody this on a podcast before.
Perfect.
But one thing, I practiced anti-aging medicine, and one of the things that at these meetings and so forth that you would go to, human growth hormone is the big thing when you go there. Like they tell you to, like get your human growth hormone, and you see advertisements about it all the time. But there was a period where I was actually injecting some human growth hormone, and I would take glutamine at night, because glutamine is a secretagogue that actually increases the amount of growth hormone while you're sleeping. And and my oncologist does, he thinks that definitely had something to do with it, because one of the things that I try to do with all of my patients, I try to keep their IGF-1 levels, their growth hormone levels, actually low. When you're young, you need growth hormone. So when you're growing, when you hit about 18, your growth hormone levels actually start declining. And the reason God made it so that your growth hormone levels decline is, remember, as you're aging, you're getting more and more DNA mutations. So you do not want a growth stimulator in the environment of a lot of DNA mutations, because that is the perfect recipe for cancer growth. So I do think that was something that I did to myself that caused an issue. So, you're the first person I ever told that to on a podcast. So,
well, I'm glad. Thank you for thank you for your honesty and for sharing that, because of the fact that one of the reasons why I don't try to dive too deep into the causes of anybody's individual disease, because it is multifactorial. It involves our exposome, all those factors, like our air quality, water quality. I was in doing environmental policy development work in government, federal, municipal, provincial, for many years. So where my whole point of my job was to keep humans safe, right, from all these environmental toxins and exposures. So everybody wants to know the one thing that caused it. Like, was it the glyphosate, or was it the fact that I ate meat, or was it this? But it's accumulation of all of these different things.
oh yeah, absolutely.
But in a lot of cases, we'll find, one client used to swim in a pond where the nickel mining factory would dump all their, waste, right? So did that contribute to his cancer? And it's the Aaron Brockovich, like the one chemical that did it. But I mean, even just a quick search here on IGF-1, there's already dozens and dozens of studies showing that it promotes the progression of multiple myeloma, IGF-1.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so we can, so it's sometimes we do find, what is it, the unicorn, or that one piece, but at the same time but what's more important is in this story and everything you're discussing is what you did when you were diagnosed. and in the months leading up to the diagnosis. And that is the most important part, is you have to take the bull by the horns, so to speak, bad metaphor here.
Exactly.
But it's
Exactly.
how do you choose to move forward, knowing that maybe there was one thing that caused it or 50 things that caused it, right? Our bodies
Right.
are
Exactly.
complex and
Exactly.
interrelated. Yeah.
Let's pause for a moment. And here's a quick word from one of our own businesses doing incredible work to help you live healthier. Are you feeling overwhelmed by all the conflicting information in the world of nutrition and wellness? You're not alone. At Richer Health, we know how confusing it can be, but we're here to guide you every step of the way. Our Eat Real to Heal online course offers 18 hours of expert instruction showing you step by step how to use food as medicine to reverse your diagnosed chronic illnesses so that you can finally get off medications and fully heal. You'll also get weekly group coaching where you can ask me all the questions that you have and get all the support that you need on your healing journey. You'll hear thousands of inspiring stories from people just like you who took their health into their own hands, proved their doctors wrong, and reversed their diseases that they thought they'd have to live with forever. Now imagine all the time and the money you'll save by avoiding unnecessary prescriptions, doctor's visits, and all those trips to the emergency rooms. And imagine all the energy that you'll gain by learning how to use food as medicine to reverse your chronic disease. What would you do with all that time, money, and energy? I'm telling you, you are going to live your best life. So if you're ready to get started, head on over to richerhealth.ca and sign up for our 6 weeks Eat Real to Heal online program now. And now back to the show.
Yeah.
What's really interesting, there was a study that came out that it actually showed that in 11 days, by going whole food plant-based, you can decrease your IGF-1 levels by 20%.
Yeah.
And they also, in this study, they looked at omnivores versus people that were vegans. I try to keep the IGF-1 levels between 120 and 160, and most vegans are around 137. Most omnivores are over 200. And there are plenty of studies that show when you have elevated IGF-1 levels when you're an adult, you will get higher incidence of cancer. In fact, on the converse, I don't know if you've ever heard of Laurent dwarfs in Peru. They have a genetic mutation where they really can't accept, they don't have the receptor for the IGF-1. And there's never been a reported case of a Laurent dwarf ever having cancer. So we do know that IGF-1 is directly correlated.
Yeah.
There's another growth stimulator. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's called mTOR. It's a protein kinase. And that also is a growth stimulator. When you're young, you need it to become a full-grown adult. But as you get older, the levels decline. And what they've shown is that your long-branched amino acids, especially leucine, is one of the primary ones, valine, isovaline. They are very strong promoters of elevated mTOR activity. So when you are eating a whole food plant-based diet, plants have very low levels of leucine. And all of your animal products have very high levels of leucine. In fact, whey protein, a lot of the bodybuilders, take whey protein, that's loaded with leucine. So in fact, do you know what the average age of a bodybuilder is, the average longevity?
What is it?
47 years.
What?
47 years old. That's how long an average bodybuilder lives. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that they're just involved in growth. They're doing everything they can to make themselves bigger. But in the process, they have all these DNA mutations going on at the same time. And that, like I said, that's a recipe for disaster. What's really interesting. Yeah. What's really interesting about mTOR, I just read a study. It was in 2015. It was a rodent study, and these rodents had colon cancer. And they put one group on what they usually feed these rodents is like a 21% protein diet. So they put one group, they just kept them on the 21%. The other group, they put them on a 4% diet of protein. The 4%, the cancer started to regress.
Yeah.
And then when they put it back up on the 21%, it started to grow.
Yeah.
Then, it just kept vacillating. It was kind of like I don't know if you remember the T. Colin Campbell story.
Well, I was going to talk about the China study, right? And,
like he did that with liver cancer.
Yeah.
He did I think it was like a 20% casein, and then he went down to, I believe it was something like a 5%. And when he went down to 5%, the liver cancer started to shrink. When he put it back up to the 20%, they started to grow. Then we put it down to 5%, they started to shrink.
Yeah.
Same concept.
And this is the thing that people need to understand about this. When if you listen to this podcast, which we hope stays up on the web, because right now a lot of our podcasts are coming down, even though we interview, credible medical doctors like yourself, they're pulling these shows down. So we'll make sure it's available to the public, but this is not new evidence. What you are presenting is not yes, there's recent studies that are proving it, but like Dr. T. Colin Campbell has been doing this work since the 70s and advocating for a low casein diet since the 70s. And so I was born in 1975 and I'm 48 years old. So most of you that are listening to this, for most of your life, we've known this information. Whether it's casein can turn cancer on and off like a light switch, whether it's mTOR can turn cancer on and off like a light switch, whether it's choline and the relationship to our TMAO reaction and heart disease. And we know that diets that are higher in choline, leads to more diabetes, more heart disease, more insulin insensitivity. But the thing is, this is not new information. And in fact, we've known this medical research has been presented for over 100 years. I have found studies from as early as 1857, 1918, right?
Oh, yeah,
your grandparents
absolutely.
knew this stuff. So this is not new.
Right. Absolutely. And one of the things I always kind of go to is, first off, when people think this is way out talking about plants, I always say, hey, listen, the National Cancer Institute recommends 9 servings of fruits and vegetables for the prevention of cancer. That's about as mainstream
as you can
get. And the reason they came up with that recommendation is because that's what the studies show. Plants have some very powerful, anti-cancer effects. But I always like to look at the blue zones. I don't know if you saw the Blue Zones documentary on Netflix. I think everybody should see it. It's kind of interesting.
It's the best.
But when you go into the blue zones, which is Sardinia, Ikaria, Okinawa, Nicoya, and then Loma Linda. I always like to use Loma Linda because it's in the United States.
Yeah. Popular, busy Western city.
Right. And all of these groups eat about 90 to 95% plant-based. In Loma Linda, women live on average about 10 years longer than their American counterparts. Men actually live about 14 years longer, and it's mainly because of these lifestyle changes. And it's not only, if you watch that Netflix, it's not only the food, but it's also things like, how much are you moving? What are your social connections? What's your purpose in life? There's a lot of other things too that are involved with longevity, but there is a common theme that they all eat about anywhere from 90 to 95% plant-based. And if they do eat meat, it's usually the size of a deck of cards. It might be once a week, maybe twice a week at the most, but it's not like the main plate like it is in America, where you have a big piece of steak and you throw a little bit of corn on the side. So it's a much different type of a culture. These people don't know the latest fads. They don't know the latest supplements. A lot of them don't even have a cell phone. They don't know about, infrared saunas and cold showers and all these different things.
Yeah.
They're just living a simple lifestyle, eating a lot of plant foods, moving a lot, socializing a lot, having purpose in life. And, I think that's the key to living a healthy life.
No, it definitely is. It definitely is. So I know our listeners are listening to all of this and they're like, yeah. Okay. The science. Now I want to know exactly what to do, because we're going to have a lot of listeners that are going to share this podcast with their friends, with their family that have just been recently diagnosed, people who are just lost a family member, and they're thinking, okay, you know what? You've convinced me. Let's dive in. And I would say, like really into like, what does this lifestyle look like, and how do you work with your patients? Because that's what you're doing right now, correct? You're working with individuals who've been
Right,
diagnosed with
right.
cancer, and you are helping you're helping them to hit remission, to turn off their
And
cancer
stay
like a
and
light.
stay in remission. Right.
Thank you. And stay in remission. So, but there's one piece that I know you want to talk about it. I want to talk about it. Our audience loves listening to this subject matter. Let's talk about the microbiome and its relationship to cancer, its relationship to multiple myeloma, its relationship to health.
Yeah, one of the things that I have been spending a lot of time with in my research is looking at the microbiome. And I'm actually writing a second edition of my book, and that's going to be another chapter in there, because when I wrote the book, there really wasn't that much information on the microbiome. In fact, I used to go to anti-aging meetings like 20 years ago, and when people would talk about the microbiome, everyone would roll their eyes like they were crazy. I mean, it was, because people just thought they were down there, these bacteria were in there. And back then they thought there were maybe like 200 of these bacteria down there. They didn't think they did anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then they came up with this 16XS like genomic research tool that allowed them to really identify that there's over at least 1,000 different bacteria in your species in your gut, but there's probably over 37 trillion bacteria in your colon. And what people don't realize, that's about how many cells you have in your body. You have about 37 trillion cells in your body, and you have about 37 trillion, gut bacteria. And as I was learning about this, the thing that it was starting to tie the whole thing together for me, because, I would read articles that people that ate more plant-based had better moods, they had better cognitive function, they had less Alzheimer's disease. And then I started finding out that these gut bacteria actually secrete 90% of your serotonin, which is your happy hormone, and 50% of your dopamine, which was mind-blowing to me. And then these gut bacteria, when they feed on the fiber, they form these short-chain fatty acids, butyrate, acetate, propionate. And what they do is they go through the blood-brain barrier and they stimulate this brain-derived neurotropic factor that actually increases the neuroconnections between the neurons, and also help the brain create new brain cells. I mean, we've recently found that the brain can actually make about 1,500 new brain cells in a day. So, that started tying in. And then, people that were eating whole food plant-based had better immune systems. They got sick less. And then when I started really studying about how the gut microbiome affects the immune system, that's really when I got totally blown away. I mean, I think everybody's heard, and I would hear, hey, your gut controls 70% of your immune function. And I really never understood what that meant. But what happens is that you have a lining of cells in your colon. They're called the colonocytes. And then you have the gut bacteria inside of the large colon, and your immune cells pass on the outside peripheral area of the colonocytes. So these gut bacteria actually send signals to these immune cells, and they tell them where to go, how hard to fight. If the inflammation is getting out of control, they tell the T regulatory cells, hey, you need to back off on this inflammation. So these gut bacteria are basically the conductors of your immune system, which is really totally mind-blowing to me. And I think that's one of the reasons why in that recent study through Sloan Kettering, which showed that people with myeloma that were eating plant-based had higher butyrate levels, and those patients were able to stay in remission much longer than people that were eating a standard American diet. It was really due to the gut bacteria and the formation of these short-chain fatty acids, which have very potent anti-inflammatory and anti-cancer effects. So it really has kind of opened my eyes and helped me kind of correlate why plant-based eating gives you all these different benefits. One of the other things I want your listeners to know, and I read this study, and this is a mind-blowing study. It was from the Proceedings of the Royal Society. Did you ever wonder how apes get all the muscle and they're vegetarians. Did you ever think about the cows that you eat? They eat grass all day. How do they get all that muscle? Did you ever think of that? Well,
I mean, this is the part that I wonder though, and I really want you as a listener, like answer that question that Dominic just asked. You know?
I have an answer for you, because this study was totally mind-blowing. It was a rodent study, but it was Firmicutes, which is the good bacteria in your gut, that did this conversion. And we have Firmicutes, we have it all over it's one of our major good bacteria. So what they did is they put radioisotopes on sucrose and cornmeal, which are two simple carbohydrates. And they tracked the radioactive carbon all the way down. It went all the way down into the colon. The Firmicutes converted the carbon into essential amino acids. The Firmicutes actually made all 9 essential amino acids. And then they followed the radioactive carbon, all the way up to protein synthesis in the muscle. I mean, it's mind-blowing, and it's a major, well-respected journal.
Hold on. How do you spell Firmicutes?
Fircu,
Firmicutes. I got it. Yeah. So hold on. Let's go back. Let's just go back to what you just said. So you're saying when they put this radioactive isotope, so it's basically, for our listeners, it's a marker, so they can follow the molecules through the body.
They can track where the carbon's going.
Exactly.
So the carbon in these simple carbohydrates ended up in these essential amino acids.
So, and you said they created the amino acids?
Essential amino acids, and they show the different levels in the article, the different, like how much leucine it created, how much valine, how much isovaline. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it is fascinating to me.
Yeah, that is amazing. That is amazing, because we often think, well, we have to consume it externally. Like, we are consuming it obviously externally. We're getting this, the starches through our beautiful phyto-rich, nutrient-rich foods. And so then we're ingesting them, and then they go in, and then essentially they're creating these amino acids in the body.
Yeah, but if you think about it, if you're eating a whole food plant-based diet, you're getting all your essential amino acids.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a problem. But when you think about a cow out there just eating grass.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't think all the essential amino acids are in that grass. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So how is that cow developing all that meat that all that
muscle,
people, all that muscle that all these people want to eat? A lot of it is coming from their gut microbiome, where it's converting some of these carbohydrates into essential amino acids. It's kind of crazy. I can get the article for you for your show notes.
Yeah,
if
please
people
do.
actually want to read the article. Yeah.
And then the second thing though about that I think is really important is the fact that the cow's eating the grass, but is also getting, perpetually refueling with this diversity of microbiome just from the soil alone, right? It's not just our body that has this.
Right.
Whereas our vegetables, like we source all of our vegetables from many organic local farms that are 5 minutes from our house, but they are forced by law to have to wash their vegetables 3 times in a wash machine before it gets packaged and delivered to the grocery stores and our restaurants. Most people don't know that.
I didn't know that.
So these farmers, and because it's all about keeping people clean, we live in this very sanitized world now, hyper sanitized as a result of COVID, which I'm not going to say it because the AI is like scanning our videos for this and pulling them down. But, so we're in this hyper sanitized world. So we're not like our microbiome. It needs to be diverse and abundant. And I've heard that we have up to 25,000 different types of bacteria in our gut, in our body, on our body, everywhere. So,
absolutely.
So,
people don't even realize, like, when you eat an apple, I mean, I've read studies where there's up to 1 million different bacteria. Yeah. Like they call them exophytes and endophytes.
Yeah.
The fruit has its own microbiome. So when you're eating fruit, you're getting all this diversity. And that's why it's important to eat a variety of different foods. Like, don't eat the same fruit every day.
Yeah.
You know, like for instance, before I take my supplements in the morning, instead of taking a handful of walnuts, I always take nuts. In fact, that's the first food I eat at 12 o'clock. I do time restricted eating. I eat my last food at 8, and then I don't eat until 12 the next day. But the first food I eat are nuts. And I do that, and then I take my supplements. And the reason I do nuts is I want to make sure I absorb all my fat soluble phytonutrients, minerals, and so forth. But instead of taking like a handful of walnuts, I do 2 walnuts, 2 pecans, 2 cashews, a couple hazelnuts, handful of pumpkin seeds. I do some sunflower seeds. I do 1 macadamia nut, 1 Brazil nut. I do 11 different nuts. And the reason I do it that way is in fact, I just did a video today on the synergy of phytochemicals. And it is mind-blowing how when you put phytochemicals together, they get this crazy, amazing synergistic effect.
Yeah.
And on my website, I have about an hour lecture on the synergy of phytochemicals. Like one of the studies, they looked at breast cancer cells. They applied a grape extract. It killed about 25% of the cancer cells. Then they added an onion extract, killed about 50%. And then if you figured if you did a 50-50 solution, you would kill maybe 33%. No, it killed 75%.
Wow.
And there was another one on prostate cancer. There were 3 different phytonutrients, and they barely did anything to the prostate cancer. When you put them together, I mean, it was magnified like 10 times. So synergy, and that's the other reason why it's important to eat diversity, because these phytochemicals work synergistically. You know, every morning, and I do consider this part of my fast. I wake up about 7 o'clock while I'm doing my computer work and so forth. I make this coffee drink, and I put 16 different freeze-dried powders in my coffee. And for instance, blueberry freeze-dried powder is a 50-to-1 ratio. So that means 1 gram of that freeze-dried powder is equal to eating 50 grams of blueberries. So I put strawberry powder, raspberry powder, there's blueberry powder, blackberry powder, acai, goji, pomegranate powder, black raspberry, grape. I put all these different powders in. In fact, I'm developing a product, and I'm doing it for myself, but I'm going to make it available to patients because it is a pain in the butt. It takes me about 10 minutes to put all these powders in there.
In your coffee. So you're putting them in your coffee.
I do it in my coffee in the morning.
Okay.
So
that's an interesting flavor. Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, cacao is the main. I put like a tablespoon of that. So it basically tastes like hot chocolate. I actually can't wait to drink it in the morning. And then I use a 16-ounce Elo cup. The coffee gets me about halfway up, and then I fill the rest with soy milk. And then I put it in the microwave. I just kind of mix it for about a minute just to heat it up again. And then I just sip that while I'm doing my computer work and so forth. Now, the way that I view that, I'm in a fasted state, and I look at that as like a chemo infusion, because you got all these phytochemicals that do these amazing things. They fragment cancer DNA, they disrupt cancer cell replication, they disrupt cancer cell signaling, they increase tumor suppression, they lower the growth factors for cancer. In fact, they make drugs work better because they improve the ability of the body to not get chemo or radiation resistant. So I'm looking at this as I'm getting a chemo infusion in a fasted state. Now, fasting is a whole nother issue. I don't know if you've ever interviewed Walter Longo.
Yeah.
But Walter Longo has done some amazing work with fasting and chemo. And what he found in rodent studies initially was that if you fast the rodent a day before and the day of the chemo works incredibly better, and they get less side effects.
Yeah.
So after he did that, he went to human trials, and he's finding the same thing. But so when I have patients that are going in for infusions, I tell them, like, if you could at least calorie restrict the day before and calorie restrict the day that you're getting your chemo, it'll work better, you'll get less side effects. So when I'm doing that drink in the morning, I'm kind of thinking to myself, okay, there's nothing else in my system. All this is going right into my veins, and it's going to do its anti-cancer activity. One study that I always show my patients, because it is so impressive, it was a study that was done in one of the major peer-reviewed journals. They looked at people that had early esophageal cancer. They broke them into two groups. One group took 1/4 cup of freeze-dried strawberry powder for 6 months. And what they found in that group, and they proved this through endoscopy. So they would go in with the scope, they would take photographs of the cancer. 80.6% of the patients after 6 months had shrinkage of the cancer, but 50% had complete elimination of the early esophageal cancer. And
before we continue, here's a quick message from one of our own companies that's helping transform lives. Stay tuned. Are you a therapist or a health practitioner ready to take your practice to the next level? Join us at our exclusive Beyond the Pill retreat, designed specifically for those who want to help their patients safely get off unnecessary medications and antidepressants. You'll learn powerful science-backed techniques in metabolic nutrition and detoxification and psychedelic therapy to support deep healing from emotional, physical trauma, and mental health struggles. Plus, you'll gain full access to our 6-month training program, giving you the tools and confidence to transform everything in your practice. Now, spaces are limited, so head over to richerhealth.ca today to book your next spot at our upcoming Beyond the Pill retreat. And now, back to the show.
And esophageal cancer, if you don't know, is the second most deadly cancer next to pancreatic cancer. So it is amazing what these phytochemicals can do. So I encourage all of my patients to do these freeze-dried powders. That's the reason I'm putting this thing together. My wife and I are actually doing it ourselves. Like, we're taking all the ones we have and then put them in these like containers, and I have a label for it and stuff. So just to make it easier for them, because I know a lot of them aren't doing the 16 that I'm doing. So I'm going to put the 16, and they can put a tablespoon or two into their coffee in the morning, and that'll definitely give them a great kick. And then usually at 10 o'clock, I have a 5-tea concoction. It's like hibiscus, chamomile, red clover, green tea that I have in there. And I do, once again, I do all 5 to get that synergistic effect. I actually put a little bit of raw honey in there, real raw. I mean, something you get like at the farmer's market. And I put a cinnamon stick in there because cinnamon has some very potent anti-cancer activity. I put some lemon juice, lime juice, and then at that point, I sip about half of that when I'm getting ready around 10 o'clock. And then at 12, when I take my nuts with my supplements, that's what I use to take the rest of my my supplements with that other half of the tea. So that's kind of how I start my day every day. So it's kind of a routine that I'm in, and it works super well. So one thing about fasting that your audience should know, and I do have this in my book. The first study that was really done on fasting in relationship to cancer was this one on breast cancer patients, and they broke them into 2 different groups. One group fasted 13 hours or more. The other group fasted 13 hours or less. The group that fasted 13 hours or more had a 36% lower relapse rate compared to the group that fasted 13 hours or less. So I always recommend to my patients to at least try to fast at least 13 hours or 14 hours a day. I do a 16-8, and I do consider, while I'm drinking that, like some people don't think that's part of the fast, but I do, because it's a liquid that I'm drinking. I do feel that my coffee and my tea is still, like, I'm still in the fasting period. So, but then I start eating, like I said, at noon the next day. So, but I do think that's a really important strategy, because when you are fasting, there's a lot more DNA repair going on. The body isn't exerting energy into digestion. There's a lot more tumor surveillance going on, and there's a lot more of this autophagy, where the body's kind of cleaning up a lot of these misfolded proteins, debris, In fact, most people don't realize this. On an average day, your body kills like 50 to 70 billion of its cells through what's called apoptosis. The tumor suppressor genes notice that a cell is starting to turn cancerous. So it sends a signal, hey, you got to kill yourself. So you have about 50 to 70 billion of these things that are getting destroyed. So autophagy helps like clean up all this debris and like kind of recycle a lot of it. So that's really important. And autophagy actually occurs when you exercise too. It kind of jacks up your autophagy mechanisms in your body. But I do think going through like a fasting period where you're feeling hungry is really important, because I do think it makes you healthy. There's some people that recommend doing, in fact, I did a post yesterday. David Sinclair it was an interview, and he recommended doing like once a month, doing a 3-day fast. But I will tell you, I can't do that. I'm an Italian boy. I got to eat my food. So, like the 16/8's fine for me, but like, going 3 days without food, that probably is a good idea to do that, but I just can't do that. So, but
yeah. And you're already doing so much. And this is the other piece that I can imagine people are listening to this and they're like, oh my gosh, the fasting, okay, the supplements, the plant-based whole food, making everything from scratch. Now I've got the coffee, now I've got the tea, now I've got this, 16 different freeze-dried powders. And, the average person can barely make themselves a smoothie in the day or make themselves, a healthy meal. And so what I love about this though, is that you are putting your health first, right? You are putting your health first. You got diagnosed with a cancer that the prognosis is not good for, the best of people. And you're like, no, I'm going to 100% rewrite my life, change my lifestyle, focus on making my body the most healthiest, living organism on the planet. It sounds like what you're doing. You're getting the results from it. But this is what people have to understand. Every time I work with a client, a lot of the times the first thing they say is, oh my gosh, but I'm not going to be able to do this, and I'm not going to be able to do this, and I'm not going to have the time, and I'm not going to have this. You can't do this without putting in the effort, without prioritizing your health, without saying, you know what, sorry, all that other stuff that I was doing before, the lifestyle that I was leading, that most likely contributed to your disease, that most likely contributed to this condition. You're absolutely right. You're going to have to, pivot. You're going to have to reprioritize. You're going to have to put up boundaries. You're going to have to make this a priority.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I have on my website, and I always strongly recommend people do this, I have a 24/7 access to me through text message and phone.
That's amazing.
I only charge $20 a month, which my web designer thought I was crazy. So what the heck, you charging just $20 a month? I say, hey, I'm doing this as a passion project. I'm just trying to help people. But when I wake up in the morning, almost every morning, I have about 25, 30 text messages from patients, because a lot of it is coaching. Like you said, there's a lot of different things going on. So they'll ask me a question about a supplement, or they read a study, or, hey, I need help with this, or I'm just blue. I need some, like I just had a patient yesterday, she just was feeling blue. So I was giving her, I said, hey, listen, you got to really try to do something fun every day. Don't think too far out in the future. Just some basic things that I use to keep me in a good mental frame, but the 24/7, access to me, and I don't know how many patients can text their doctor at 2 a.m. and get an answer the next morning, or sometimes I'm even answered that night. But that has been really, really important, because it is a lot. And I will tell you, most of these people are pretty motivated though. They've already read my book. They know that they're going to have to eat whole food, plant-based. I mean, and a lot of them have already incorporated some of the things because they have read my book. So it's not like I'm taking somebody off the street that's eating like a standard American diet. I'm going to like totally change them. I'm just not doing that. Now, weight loss patients, I do some weight loss. They're the hardest ones, because they're eating a really crappy diet and you're trying to convert them. So they're the ones that are more frustrating actually than the cancer patients, because the cancer patients, I mean, they have a life-threatening issue. And they've read my book and they're in. So they're going to do whatever they can to get themselves, and stay in remission as long as they can. So
yeah, we provide the same service to our clients as well. And we are taking the people who are coming off the streets eating burgers and fries and beer
oh,
and
okay.
chicken.
Well, good luck with that.
But the reason it works though is because they've hit their rock bottom. They've been diagnosed with a disease.
Oh, okay.
So they're
Okay.
coming. So it's exactly the same as you. We work
Yeah.
with over 150 different chronic diseases and cancers, and so the people are motivated for sure, but they weren't motivated when they had all the symptoms. They were only motivated when they got the diagnosis, and their doctor's like, "Hey, we need to put you on drugs, or we need to do a surgery, or it's like time for a treatment, like chemo,
Exactly.
cytotoxic
Yeah.
drug treatment."
Right.
So
Right.
for the average person that's listening to this and who hasn't been diagnosed yet, where, I mean, most of our listeners have, because we're living in a world where 60% of the population has a chronic disease. Sometimes they have to wait till they get cancer before they do what you say and what
Oh,
I
yeah.
say.
Absolutely.
And I'm like,
Absolutely.
if you're listening to this now, like, and do what Dominic, you said you and your wife are doing, that you make it fun. You make it
Yeah.
exciting to be in the kitchen. It's
Right.
fun to experiment with these different foods and try figs, try even growing figs in your backyard. You can grow figs in your backyard, depending on, most climates will grow figs, and they're so delicious. And if you've never eaten them before, then you know what, suck it up, buttercup, and just try it and try
And
it a
you know what?
second time.
The gut microbiome loves figs because it's like
Yes.
almost all soluble fibers. So
Yes, exactly.
interesting.
I love it. So I love what you're doing. And we do the same thing too. People can email us. We give 1 hour a week of group coaching. So if you have questions, show up there. We answer your emails. People like call me on the weekends and text me, same thing. And for any practitioner who's out there listening to this saying like, that is crazy, why would I do that? Like, my whole life I'd be working 24 hours a day. I'm telling you, when you help people reverse their chronic disease, and I know you feel the same way, Dominic, this is not work. This
Oh,
is
yeah.
not
It's
work. And your clients get better results, because guess what? They're going to get all their questions answered initially. And then before you know it, they're off. They're not calling you every day because they know what to do. They're no longer
right.
looking at the I will call it the fake science. So these are the bloggers or the nutritionists that never have read a study that are out there giving advice like, you need to eat protein, so eat your meat. And then all of a sudden, I get that they're asking these questions like, but this person said that. Well, wait a minute. Like they learn how to be discerning researchers as well. So you're creating a population that is healthy, discerning, and they won't be calling you every 2 seconds. Our clients are amazing. Like they become so independent, and when it comes to their health, they're no longer duped by what the media is saying.
And the plant-based community is getting bigger.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, there's more. Even the fact I don't like a lot of these ultra processed plant foods, but in some ways it kind of has opened up the whole idea of people at least trying plant-based. And I will tell you one thing. I don't know if you know this, but I listened to a podcast with Simon Hill. He interviewed a resident that worked at the Loma Linda University, the medical hospital, and she's in on a lot of the the Adventist health studies that they do. And it's interesting, I never knew this. She said that Seventh-day Adventists, about 14% of their diet is actually these plant-based products. And she said, when you go, like, what's really interesting in Loma Linda, one of these days I want to go there because I'm curious. Like when you go into the grocery stores, there's all kind of like plant, like Impossible Burgers and kind of stuff. So she said that about 14% of their diet is actually these, plant-based products. And I will tell you, even myself, every once in a while, in fact, I did a post one time on healthy vegan options. I did one on healthy vegan snacks. You have to live your life too a little bit. And, like every once in a while, we buy these like Smart Dogs. They're like 60 calories. There's probably any saturated fat in them. Every once in a while, I'll throw that on like a whole wheat bun, throw some mustard relish on it, and I'll have it for lunch. Like I don't do that all the time, but I like a hot dog. I miss a hot dog. And
I miss a hot dog, and I miss a hamburger too. And so I get you on that. And we've obviously made the Engine 2 diet Rip Esselstyn's hot dogs, which are phenomenal, but they take like 4 hours to make, just to let everybody know.
Really?
But they are the most delicious hot dog I've ever had in my entire life.
I eat his Yeah, I eat his bean burgers. I think they're really
Yeah, they're
they're
really
the
good.
most nutritious. Yeah, they're the
Yeah.
best. And in the video that I made, I said that his were the best bean burgers to
Yeah.
eat. So but just to make life a little bit simpler too, sometimes if you have
You
an
gotta buy it.
occasional processed, plant food, and remember, a lot of things are processed. I mean, when you drink soy milk, that's processed.
Yeah.
When you eat Ezekiel bread, that is processed.
Yeah.
And when you just make a recipe, you're processing it.
Yeah.
But it's just when you eat a lot of these foods like Doritos and so forth, where they were throwing in all the sugar and salt and all these additives and a lot of the seed oils and so forth. I mean, those are extremely detrimental to your health. There's no fiber. I think that's the main thing. And one of the things I will tell you that I've gotten away from, and I'm sure you have to deal with all these arguments on social media, like vegan versus paleo versus keto. You know what? Just turn the attention to fiber.
Yes.
Just don't even talk about like plants versus meat versus anything. Just talk about fiber. I saw an interview, Joe Rogan interviewed Max Lugavere. He wrote a book called Genius Foods. And it was interesting when he got onto the fiber thing and the gut microbiome. Max Lugavere, he was just tongue-tied. I mean, it was like he just was lost. He just didn't even know what to say. When you're eating a carnivore diet, I mean, you're basically getting like zero fiber, and your gut microbiome is like destroyed.
Yeah.
I mean, you basically have these pathogenic bacteria that are releasing a lot of endotoxins, secondary bile acids. You don't have enough of the good beneficial bacteria that are creating these short chain fatty acids. I mean, you are just like decimating your microbiome when you do that. So it's kind of interesting. So I always try to turn the conversation to fiber, because only 3% of the population is even hitting 25 grams of fiber.
Yeah.
And you should be eating about 60 grams of fiber per day. I mean, if you're eating whole food plant-based, you're getting 60 grams. In fact,
Easily.
I don't know if you're familiar with the Hazda tribe. They're in Tanzania. They are the last hunter-gatherer tribe in the world. People always say the hunter-gatherers were like meat eaters.
Yeah.
You know how much fiber they eat a day? 160 grams of fiber.
Yes. And
they have the most of, when they looked at their microbiome, I mean, they had it was like 4,000 different species in their gut microbiome. So,
and this is why it's important for people to understand. I just want to make sure people heard what you just said here. They're a hunter-gatherer society, but they're not. They're more of a gather-hunter society, because there's not a stitch of meat. So if they're truly are just a hunter society, they wouldn't be able to reach those levels of fiber, because there is no fiber in eggs. There's no fiber in fish. There is no fiber in red meat. There's no fiber in chicken. There's no fiber in animal-based products. And so they are a gather-hunter society. So all of the paleo people, the keto people that are out there saying, well, oh, we're all hunters. No, the only reason we think we're hunters is because guess what? Fibrous foods, plant-based foods, they don't create fossils very well. So you don't get to see that when the people are eating all these fibrous foods, our ancestors lived off these fibrous plant-based foods, but it's not easy to see and detect it because of the fact that, guess what? There's no fossilization. So when we look at caveman societies and we are like, oh, they must have just eaten lots of, buffalo and mammoth and tigers and everything. No, you're not seeing all the plants, the berries, the grains, everything else that they would have eaten.
Yeah, exactly. Now the Hasdas do eat meat once in a while, but it's like occasionally, like if they get the lucky hunt, and then they'll eat the meat. But it's mainly to get to 160 grams of fiber per day, man. You're eating a lot. You're eating a lot of berries and like all kind of different plant foods. So so that's a good thing to know, especially when people that bring up the paleo thing, that the people in how many years ago, I don't think they were primarily hunters. I agree with you. They were mainly gatherers, and they hunted a little bit, but it was primarily plant foods that they were eating.
Yeah. And you know how else I know this as well? And so this might just be a little anecdotal story is I come from Africa and I don't come from a big city. I come from a village that is exactly the same as it was thousands of years ago. So I have generations
Wow.
of family from this village. There to this day, no water, no electricity. They're subsistence farmers. They grow their own food. They pick their own food. They cook their own food. They live in a village. Everybody breastfeeds. And when you go there, everybody looks like, I've said this in so many, but everybody looks like they're Michael Jordan. Like they all look like fit NBA basketball players. They all
Yeah,
look like
yeah,
but they don't really have any meat. Like they might have one chicken for 70 people that they only eat when there's a funeral or a wedding.
right.
Right.
Exactly.
So when we
Exactly.
talk about these blue zone communities, they're a blue zone community. Yeah, they might die of malaria and they might die of like HIV. Well, not even HIV in our village, but they don't have these chronic diseases that we see in these, even from a city like Blantyre, which is, maybe 4 or 5, 6 hours away, where everybody has diabetes, everybody has heart disease. But why? Because they're consuming all the refined oils, all the refined salt. My grandmother never even saw oil, salt, or sugar refined in her life. Only near
Wow.
the
That's
end of her
crazy.
death when they were like peddlers coming there's all the big Nestle signs and there's all the big canola oil and soy oil signs that are like, you eat your oil, where they're just basically now in that was in 2019 when I was there, that they're trying to get the villagers to eat oil.
Yeah. Wow. That's
They cooked
crazy.
in water their whole
Yeah.
lives,
Now,
right?
I will tell you, I do use a little bit of a high quality extra virgin olive oil on my salad, and I'll tell you why I do it.
Yeah, I want to know this.
In my book, there's about 3 pages on olive oil, and olive oil does have very potent anti-cancer activity.
Yes.
48% of the polyphenols are called saccharidoids, and they have done several studies on saccharidoids. And in some of the studies, I mean, they had amazing effects on especially breast cancer stem cells. Was able to, in fact, it had like extraordinary epigenetic effects too. It affected like 160 genes in positive direction. So I do think a little bit, like I use a teaspoon. The problem with oils is that people just start like loading it on. And before you know it, they have a lot of calories. There's, even though 14% of a tablespoon is saturated fat, I mean, you put like 3 tablespoons on there, now you got like, a huge amount of saturated fat. But and the other thing I do like about a high quality extra virgin olive oil, and I use Lucchini. I get the top picks from consumerlab.com. The Lucchini I put on a little bit. I actually put a little flaxseed oil on my salad too, and then I use an apple cider vinegar. But the real one of the reasons I do it is for its anti-cancer effects. But the other thing that people don't realize is if you eat a salad without any fat, you are not going to absorb any of the fat soluble nutrients in there. And I get in arguments with some of the people in some of these plant-based groups that are like so strict with oil. And if you look through the studies, olive oil does lower your LDL cholesterol, and it some of the short-term studies show that it has a negative effect on the endothelium, but if you look at long-term studies, it has a positive effect. It's like exercise.
Yeah.
Short-term, it has a negative effect on the endothelium, but long-term, it has a positive effect.
Yeah.
So I think a high quality extra virgin olive oil in very small quantities on your salad, for example, is okay. In fact, I think it has some health promoting activity. In fact, I just did a video on white rice. It's brown rice versus white rice. Now, the thing I brought about in this video is that some of the longest lived cultures in the world eat white rice. The endosperm is left, get rid of the germ and the bran. But a lot of the Asians, for example, like the white rice because it's kind of more starchy, the endosperm, it's easier to cook, has a longer shelf life. But what people need to realize is when you eat food, you're just not drinking olive oil. Like you just don't drink it like a cup of it, you drink it. You're typically putting it on high fiber vegetables. So what I talked about in this video was, if you take white rice and you make sure you put a lot of high fiber vegetables on it, maybe a little bit of a high quality, just a teeny bit of a high quality oil, that'll significantly lower the glucose spike. And cancer patients definitely want to keep their glucose spikes down. The other thing you can do is if you refrigerate it and then you heat it the next day, it becomes what's called resistant starch, which your digestive enzymes in your stomach and your intestine cannot metabolize. It goes down to the large colon, and the gut bacteria love it. So there's some little tricks, especially with pasta. I told you I'm Italian.
Yeah.
So if I eat pasta, I usually try to eat whole wheat pasta, but if I go to a restaurant, I just tell them to put every vegetable they can on there. And then I know that that's going to lower the glucose spike. So,
Exactly.
So people need to realize when you're looking at different foods, you really shouldn't look at them, individually. Like if you just look at olive oil and you look at it like, okay, I'm going to drink the olive oil, that's one thing, but who does that? They're always, and I've heard actually some commentators talk about the fact that maybe cultures that eat more olive oil, like the Mediterranean diet, maybe the reason they're living longer is maybe because they're eating more vegetables.
Exactly. And
because they're putting the olive oil on the vegetables, so you really have to, realize that just a little bit of oil, a high quality oil like Lucchini or California branch olive oil is like the highest quality.
And now a quick break to hear an important message from one of our own companies that could be the key to transforming your health. Are you ready to take your healing journey to the next level? Discover our Eat Real to Heal book, your ultimate guide to reversing chronic disease using food as medicine. This book is packed with powerful insights and proven strategies, and this book will teach you how to heal from the inside out to fully get off your prescription medications and take control of your health naturally. You'll read inspiring stories from people just like you who took charge of their health, who reversed their diseases, and reclaimed their lives. It's time to stop living in pain and to start thriving. So go ahead and grab your copy at richerhealth.ca or amazon.com and begin your journey to true healing today. And now back to the show.
Did I mention to you about consumerlab.com?
You just talked about it briefly, but Leah, tell our audience what
it's all about. That's where people should really go if you're thinking about a supplement. And that's what I do with all my supplements. They can get them all on Amazon. But before I make a recommendation, I go on consumerlab.com. You have to pay for it. I think it's like $40 for the year or something like that. But when I went on, for example, olive oil, I wanted the one I was using was called Carapelli. And I thought it was a good extra virgin olive oil. They have organic and so forth. I go on there, like 25% of it's rancid. So they really go through and analyze all of these products. Some of them didn't even have olive oil, which was
yes, I know,
mind-blowing. So they always have a top pick. So they, Lucchini was one of the top picks, and then that California olive ranch was a top pick. So they were the two top picks. Like yesterday, I had somebody that's having a lot of dysbiosis. So I went in there to look at the best, what was the best probiotic. I went on there, and their top pick it's called Biome. So I recommended that. It was expensive, but that was what their top pick was. So I really do trust them because I know they go through and they analyze everything, look at how many heavy metals are in there, there are contaminants in there, and is there the amount that the people say is in there. So if they say there's 5 milligrams, sometimes there's 1 milligram. So that's a good place to go. If you're thinking about a supplement, they'll give you like a whole list of supplements, and then their top picks, some that are approved and some are disapproved. So that's a good place to go. So just
That's
thought I'd mention
amazing.
that for your
Yeah,
audience.
and another good website. Thank you for that. And we're going to put that in the show notes for everybody. And the other website to go to is drugs.com as well. And that is another place where you can go to put the prescription drug that you have just been prescribed, so you can get familiar with what all the side effects are, what medications to not mix it with, what supplements you
Good,
can or
good.
cannot take. So we tell our clients to do that as well, because a lot of the times they're like, well, my doctor just told me to take it. But then they end up with, rectal bleeding, and they find out later it's the result of that like direct drug that they're taking, but it was there all along in drugs.com, but their practitioner didn't tell them. So it's important for people to get really savvy to do that. And it only takes a couple minutes to go to, it's consumerreport.com, you said?
No, consumerlab.com.
Oh, consumerlab.com.
It's not labs, it's lab. Because the
Okay.
first time I put it in, I put labs installed.
Okay. Perfect. I will make
consumerlab.com. Yeah.
Awesome. I'll make sure the link is there. Drugs.com is the other place. And it just takes a couple minutes to do this extra research for yourself. This is you advocating for yourself and your health. And it's just so important to do that, because everybody just believes what they see written on the bottle or on the website. And a lot of the times it's not factual. So this conversation, I love it. You've blown my mind on just so many levels. I love your tenacity, your dedication to your health, to helping your patients as well. And so what should people do next? Now that they've listened to this podcast, they've heard all this information, a lot of people are like, what steps do I take next? What do you recommend for them? And how can they also work with you if they get diagnosed with cancer?
Well, what they do is they go to my website. It's naturalinsightsintocancer.com. And then up at the top, it says shop, and then it says virtual meeting, and then just kind of hit them. And then they can get a 1 or 2 hour virtual consultation. I usually recommend a 2 hour. I mean, the other day I did one from a lady in Japan. It was like 2.5 hours. I go whatever time it takes to really go through all the information. And then the day after, I send them 2 letters. So I give them all my recommendations. A lot of times, because I am a medical doctor, I will give some recommendations even with their meds. Hey, maybe they might want to cut this back, or maybe go to lower dose. Mention to your doctor that I don't think it's an issue that they take antioxidants, but I leave it up to them with their oncologist, because I know the oncologist is not going to like that.
Yes.
So I write them a long letter. Then the second letter are photos with a bunch of captions. I mean, these are very long letters. And in the second one, I have a bunch of different cookbooks, different things like a sauna, portable infrared sauna that they can use, ways that they can detox. That's one thing we didn't talk about is, making sure your water's purified, eat organic, try to put air filters in each one of your rooms. And then to get rid of it, I always recommend milk thistle as liver support, because liver does most of your detox. I'm not into these like cleanses that people do, these GI cleanses and everything. I mean, I actually think they destroy your microbiome.
They
when you do that.
I agree. Yeah.
But what you basically want to do is support the liver. And so you have phase 1 detox enzymes. They basically make the toxin into a polar molecule, and then that goes to the phase 2, and that makes the molecule into a water-soluble molecule. And then from that point, you get rid of it through sweat. So that would be heavy exercise where you're sweating, through infrared sauna. My wife and I do that every night before we go to bed. We watch TV. We have a portable one, your head sticks out. I don't know if you've ever seen those before, but your hands and your head stick out. So
yeah.
we're watching the Blacklist now. We're like addicted to it. So she goes in for 30 minutes, all sweaty. Then we put it on pause. She takes a shower. Then I get in for 30 minutes. Like my underwear, like totally soaked when I get out of there. But you realize how many toxins you're getting rid of, when you do that. So, so we do that every night, drinking a lot of, good purified liquid. That's how you get rid of a lot of toxins through the kidney. And then high fiber. That's how you get it, rid of it through your stool. So you can get rid of it by decreasing the amount of toxin coming in, and then different ways that you can get rid of it. And once again, these coffee enemas that people do and these GI cleanses, I just think they're really like way off base. I mean, I think they do more damage to the microbiome than actually help.
Well, I'm
Um,
glad that you brought that up because of the fact that the coffee enema is one of the protocols, the 4 parts of the protocol that my clients do. And
oh,
it's
you have them do that?
100%. And
Okay.
I've done extensive research that goes back like decades and decades and decades with the coffee enema. And I mean, I wish we're going to have another show because there's so much we haven't talked about. Ozone therapy. I think you mentioned that at the beginning as well. Talking about the health benefits of the sauna, we can dive into that. But just for, any listeners who are like, oh my God, Dr. Brandy's saying no coffee enemas, they destroy the GI tract. One of the things that I know most people don't understand about the coffee enema is that they're not cleansing the intestines at all. They're actually targeting through the hepatic portal vein system, the liver. And what it's doing, it's actually dilating your bile ducts by 700%. So it's not targeting the intestinal tract. It actually doesn't disrupt the intestinal tract at all. What it's doing, it's directly targeting the liver. And so anyway, I'm not going to dive into the science of it.
Oh no, that's fine. That's fine.
And well, and maybe I will. And also what it does, it also increases your glutathione S-transferase production. It also helps to stimulate sex hormone binding globulin, which goes into trap all the free floating estrogens. So there's a whole lot that the coffee enema does through, and unfortunately there's no other product you can use. It has to be coffee because it has specific molecules, chemicals. The palmitates in coffee help to do all of that. So it's not actually like the most that it does is some warm liquid will sit in the intestinal tract, but it doesn't affect the microbiome. So but versus a high colonic. And I do not agree with high colonics. I agree with you. I don't agree with any of these, single organ cleanses people are doing, like the, master cleanse or the olive oil cleanse or whatever the cleanse is.
Right.
They're dangerous to the body, and a colonic done to as well is also very dangerous to the microbiome.
Well,
So
maybe one day we can have a discussion about coffee enema.
Yeah, we should.
There is an article that came out in 2014 in Hepatology where they showed that just drinking coffee, actually had a lot of the same benefits as like 2 cups of coffee had a lot of the same benefits that you're talking about doing it up through the butt. Yeah. So like I can go over that study. I can send you the study. It was a rodent study, but it did show that it had a lot of these positive benefits on the liver, on the glutathione, and so forth, just by like drinking the coffee. That's why I do a coffee drink in the morning. A lot of these plant-based people say you can't. Like I saw you had listened to Esseltyn was on one of your, no caffeine and no coffee, but coffee. If you look at longevity studies, most centenarians are coffee drinkers.
Exactly.
In fact, most Americans get most of their antioxidants from coffee. So
yeah, it's a vasodilator. It's like so many health benefits from coffee. And it really depends too on. There's so much we can go into here. I mean, I have a feeling you and I could have our own show and keep going forever.
Yeah, for sure.
On this.
For sure.
So okay, so let's get back to they can go to your website, they can book a consult with you. You're going to spend 2 hours, sometimes plus if they need it. You're going to design a protocol for them to follow and ways that they can also be communicating with their oncologist as well, so that they can help to adjust meds, help to incorporate supplements, help to change their diet over. They're going to be doing all of this. And then you are helping your clients to be able to reverse their cancer, essentially their chronic illnesses. Do you work with other people who don't have cancer?
No, I primarily just focus on cancer.
Okay.
I've kind of made that my book Speak Back Cancer Naturally.
Yeah.
I have cancer. I know I just want to kind of help those kind of patients because let's just face it, cancer. I don't know if you ever read the book Emperor of All Maladies.
Yeah, I love that.
Cancer is the emperor of all maladies. I mean, it is the most formidable, relentless disease on the face of the earth. And even when you talk to people like Dr. Esseltyn, he'll say it over and over again. Cardiovascular disease isn't a malignancy; it's something that can be reversed.
Yeah.
Malignancy is. It's a tough battle. So I really focus my attention on that. And after they do the consult, I mentioned to you about the 24/7 access to me. I do think that's extremely important. And I do recommend my patients to do the 70 plus Quest biomarker testing evaluation, where they go on there. I send them a sheet with all these different tests, all their vitamins, minerals, IGF-1, hemoglobin A1C, omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, heavy metals. I mean, I really check everything. And they basically just take it to Quest, and then Quest sends me the results. Then I evaluate everything. I write them a big letter, where their deficiencies are and so forth, and where they need to correct. And I will tell you that I have never had anybody that had normal mineral levels.
Mm-hmm.
Not one single patient.
Yeah.
And there was an article that I posted probably about 2 months ago. It was through the International Journal of Sports Nutrition, where they looked at the Atkins diet, the Best diet, the DASH diet, and the South Beach diet. And every one of them had low levels or non-detected levels of molybdenum, chromium, iodine, biotin, vitamin D, and vitamin E.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I see when I do the testing. I mean, I don't think I've ever had anybody even have a detected molybdenum level when I check this.
Wow.
And most of them have chromium. And one thing that people that eat whole food plant-based need to know is they need to, make sure they supplement with iodine.
Yeah.
Either
That's a
iodized
number
salt.
one molecule.
I actually recommend nascent iodine. I put 3 drops in my daily drink every day. You can get that on.
Yeah,
on
we
Amazon.
do Lugol's, potassium iodine in water solution. It's a 2% solution. So that's, it's critical part for sure.
But I think a lot of the mineral issues are really the way that we toil the soil now. I just don't think I read an article in one of the horticultural journals where they looked at the mineral content of food 50 years ago versus today. And it's about anywhere from, depending on the study, anywhere from 6% to 50% lower.
Exactly.
The mineral levels, mainly the way that we're, toiling the soil.
Yeah, no. And this is something, I gave a presentation about 20 years ago to our local agricultural society that's responsible for, managing all the farms in the area. And I proposed no-till farming back then because of the fact that it disrupts the microbiome and it's making our food less nutrient rich. And
right.
They went crazy. They were angry. They were like,
no-till
farming. And, and they thought I was, but fortunately now, I mean, the research is pretty conclusive that we have to stop this. We can move to crimping farming. We have to, more lasagna farming, more like anything that doesn't destroy the microbiome of the soil. And because we're losing topsoil at exponential rates, we are losing nutrients in our food. We are losing our or biodiversity, across the planet, and the result of the way that we are farming. So
yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, no, this is amazing. So how do we land this one? Where do we end? I don't want it to end. I want to keep going.
People can, if they want to get my book, they can get it on Amazon. It's called Beat Back Cancer Naturally. If they want to get it on my website, they can get it there, same price. When they go to my website, I do give them a signed copy. And if they basically want to follow me on social media, I would say Instagram. It's called Cancer Veggie Doc. I have about 100,000 followers on there. Awesome. And I do a post every single day. And then I basically do that 24/7 coaching, which I think is a really big part.
Yeah.
And I think probably the most important part of getting these people to the finish line and make sure they stay in a remission. So, so that's pretty much it.
I love it. This was quite the show. I've always love our guests that come on here that take the time out of their busy day to be able to share their knowledge, to do this. So I want to thank you very, very, very much. You have shared probably about 10 podcasts worth of information here.
Okay, good.
Yeah, which is phenomenal. I know our guests are going to love this. So I want to thank you for being on the show. And definitely we need to have you back on because there are so many topics that we didn't even get to dive into. So I hope
Yeah. The next time we're on, we'll talk about acid-base control. So that's like another thing. We'll talk about that
subject matter.
Because I'm big into alkalinizing the pH. So that's really super important for cancer patients. But that's another podcast.
So thank you very much for being on the Eat Real to Heal show, Dr. Brandy.
Hey, it was great. I really super enjoyed the conversation.
Myself.
And there you have it, folks. As promised, an incredible show. So much beautiful information from a very, very, very caring, generous individual, Dr. Dominic Brady, who's gone out of his way to be able to share his knowledge with you. So please also reach out to him, tell him how you like the podcast. And again, share this episode with your loved ones so that we can really make a difference in the world of cancer, chronic disease, reversing these conditions. And of course, when you do this, this is how we make a dent in a broken medical system, because it really is a broken medical system. Hospitals all over the country are suffering. They have people waiting in lineups for hours and hours and hours at a time, not even able to get in for appointments, not able to get in with specialists, not able to get the proper testing that they need done. It's taking months and months and months, and we have people needlessly dying from fully preventable and reversible diagnosed conditions like diabetes, heart disease, even many types of cancer, autoimmune disorders, people who want to have babies and can't get pregnant. What the thing that they don't know is that they're just missing a few important minerals, nutrients, and vitamins that help them, like so many of my clients have done, help them to have a baby when they want that. So people are needlessly suffering. So please share this podcast with others and come join us next week for the next episode of Eat Real to Heal. See you on the other side. Thanks for being here. Bye for now.